The grand chamber of the Valoran Dominion was the largest room Unipark had ever seen. It stretched so far that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Thousands of alien representatives sat in floating platforms that circled the central stage like rings around a planet. Some of them had scales. Some had feathers. Some had bodies that bent in ways that made her uncomfortable to look at. But they all had one thing in common. They were afraid. Not of her. Not of humanity. They were afraid of the creature that sat on the throne at the center of the chamber. High Sovereign Mothrol was 12 feet tall. His body was covered in hard black plates that looked like armor, but were actually his skin. His eyes glowed with a soft purple light, and when he spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. He did not need a microphone. His voice was the chamber itself. Una stood alone on a small platform in front of him. She was the only human in the room. She was also the smallest person there. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot, and she wore the gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. In her hand, she held a leather satchel that contained everything she had brought from home. The chamber had been loud with whispers when she arrived. Now it was silent. Everyone was watching. Mothrol raised one of his forearms and pointed at her. His voice filled the room like thunder rolling across mountains. "Human," he said. "You stand before the Valoran Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 9,000 cycles. We have conquered 400 species. We have crushed every rebellion and silenced every voice that spoke against us." Una said nothing. She had been trained for this moment for 15 years. She knew exactly what was coming. Mothrol continued. "Your species is young. You have only traveled among the stars for 200 of your years. You are weak. You are small. You are nothing." The representatives in the floating platforms began to murmur. Some of them looked at Una with pity. Others looked away entirely. They had seen this before. They knew what happened to species that caught the attention of the Dominion. "We have decided," Mothrol said, "that your world will be added to our empire. Your people will serve us. Your resources will feed our fleets, and your history will be forgotten." He paused. The purple glow in his eyes grew brighter. "This is a declaration of war. The Valoran Dominion will crush Earth and all who stand with it. You have 30 cycles to prepare. After that, we will come for you." The chamber exploded with sound. Representatives cheered and shouted. Some of them banged their appendages against their platforms. It was a celebration. Another species was about to fall. Another world was about to burn. Una waited for the noise to die down. She could feel thousands of eyes watching her. They expected her to beg. They expected her to cry. They expected her to fall to her knees and plead for mercy. She did something else. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellow with age and fragile at the edges. She unfolded it carefully, held it up in front of her face, and began to read. The chamber fell silent again. But this time, the silence was different. It was confused. Mothrol leaned forward on his throne. "What are you doing?" Una did not look up. She continued reading the paper as if she were sitting in a coffee shop on a Sunday morning. Her face showed no fear. Her hands did not shake. She even turned the page. "Hume," Mothrol said again, his voice growing angry, "I have just declared war on your entire species. I have told you that your world will burn. And you are reading?" Una finally looked up. She folded the paper neatly and slipped it back into her satchel. "Forgive me," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. It carried through the chamber without any effort at all. "I was reading my newspaper. It is a tradition on Earth. We read them when we are bored." The silence in the chamber became absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Even Mothrol seemed frozen on his throne. Una smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that no one else in the room understood. "You should have researched us," she said. She reached into her satchel again and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and suddenly every screen in the chamber changed. The images of the Valoran flag disappeared. In their place was a single file, a data package from Earth. "This is our history," Una said. Every war we have ever fought, every weapon we have ever built, every time we have looked into the darkness and refused to die. She began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. You have conquered 400 species, she said, without turning around. That is very impressive. But none of those species had ever fought a real war. None of them had ever been tested. None of them had ever burned their own cities just to see what would happen. She stopped at the door and finally turned to face Mothral one last time. We have been fighting since before we could walk upright. We have killed more of our own kind than you have killed in your entire history. We have split the atom and used it to destroy ourselves. And then we rebuilt. Again and again and again. Mothral's eyes flickered. For the first time in centuries, something cold moved through his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was doubt. You call us young, Una said. You call us weak. But we are not weak. We are patient. We have been waiting for someone to give us a reason to stop pretending. She opened the door and stepped through it. Before it closed behind her, she spoke one final time. Thank you for the reason. The door shut. The chamber remained silent. On every screen, humanity's history continued to scroll. Wars, plagues, famines, nuclear explosions. And through it all, humans kept moving forward. They kept building. They kept fighting. One of the representatives finally spoke. His voice was small and trembling. What have we done? No one answered, because no one knew. The Valoran Dominion had declared war on a species they did not understand. And somewhere in the cold space between stars, that species was already preparing to show them what that mistake would cost. Commander Dreth had not slept in 3 days. He sat alone in his quarters on the flagship Eternal Flame, staring at a screen that showed images from Earth. His food sat untouched beside him. His water had gone warm. He could not look away from what he was seeing. The human data file was massive. It contained thousands of years of records. Wars, weapons, strategies, and the more Dreth read, the more the cold feeling in his stomach grew. His advisor, a scholar named Vin, entered the room without knocking. Vin was old by Valoran standards, with faded plates and dim eyes, but his mind was still sharp. He had studied 100 conquered species. He understood how civilizations worked. You have been watching this for too long, Vin said. You need rest. Dreth did not look up. They dropped nuclear weapons on themselves. Vin moved closer and looked at the screen. It showed a ruined city. The buildings had been flattened. The ground was black and burned. In the center of the destruction, there was nothing but ash. I have read about this, Vin said quietly. They were fighting each other. 2 groups of humans. They built weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash of light, and then they used them. Dreth finally turned to face him. Why would any species do this to itself? Vin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was troubled, because they wanted to win. They wanted to win so badly that they were willing to burn their own world to do it. Dreth looked back at the screen. Another image appeared. Soldiers charging across a field filled with mud and death. Machines that shot fire. Clouds of poison gas drifting over trenches filled with bodies. This is not war, Dreth said. This is madness. No, Vin replied. This is humanity. They do not fight like other species. They do not surrender when they are outnumbered. They do not retreat when they are losing. They dig in. They adapt. They find new ways to kill each other. He pointed at the screen, where another image had appeared. A mushroom cloud rising into the sky. And when they run out of conventional weapons, they build new ones. Weapons that even they are afraid of. Weapons that could end their entire civilization. Dreth stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Valoran fleet stretched across space like a field of stars. Thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers. The largest military force in the galaxy. We outnumber them 40-1, he said. Our technology is superior. Our soldiers have been trained for centuries. Vin came to stand beside him. That is what the file shows as well. The humans have a small fleet. Old ships. Limited resources. Then why am I afraid? Vin did not answer immediately. He watched the fleet floating in the darkness, each ship a symbol of Valoran power. Power that had never been truly tested. "Because you are wise," Vin finally said, "and wise beings know that numbers do not always win wars." On Earth, the atmosphere was very different. In a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Korea, Defense Minister Tae Kong stood before a room full of generals and admirals. The screens behind him showed the same images the Valorans were watching. Humanity's history of violence. Humanity's capacity for destruction. But the people in this room were not afraid. They were focused. "The Valoran fleet will arrive in 30 days, Tae said. "They believe we have a small defense force. A few hundred ships, outdated weapons." It was not a kind smile. They are wrong. Admiral Seok Roo stepped forward. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles. He had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts. He had buried friends and enemies alike, and he had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. "Project Wangap is ready," Seok said. Everything is in position. The screens changed. Instead of history, they now showed maps. The solar system appeared, with Earth at the center. Small dots began to light up across the map. In the asteroid belt, on the moons of Jupiter, in the frozen spaces beyond Neptune, hidden in comets that drifted through the outer darkness. 40 years ago, Tae explained, a Valoran scout ship crashed on our planet. We recovered it in secret. We studied it. We reverse-engineered every piece of technology we could find. They pointed at the map. And then we built. Not openly. Not where anyone could see. We built in the shadows. In the places no one would think to look. The dots on the map multiplied. Thousands of them. Each one represented a hidden weapon. A secret ship. A trap waiting to be sprung. "The Valorans think they are attacking a young and weak species," Tae said. "But we are not weak. We are patient. We've been preparing for this day since the moment we learned we were not alone in the universe." Admiral Seok looked around the room. Every face showed the same. Expression, determination, hunger, the desire to prove something that humans had always known about themselves. "We will let them come," Seok said. "We will let them see our small fleet. We will let them think they have already won." He pressed a button, and the screen showed the hidden fleet emerging from their hiding places. Ships that were built to kill. Weapons that defied known physics. An army that had been sleeping in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And when they are deep inside our system, Seok continued, "When they think victory is certain, we will show them what humanity is capable of." Tae nodded. He thought about the message they had received from Ambassador Yuna, her report on the declaration of war, her description of Mothral's arrogance, her final words before she left the Valoran chamber, "Thank you for the reason. Spread the word to all commanders," Tae said. "Tell them to prepare their crews. Tell them the waiting is over." He looked at the map one final time, at the dots representing humanity's hidden strength, at the trap that was about to close. The galaxy thinks they know who we are. They think we are prey. They think we are victims. His voice grew cold. "It is time to show them that we are the most dangerous thing in this universe. Not because we are strong, but because we have learned to survive by being the thing that everything else should fear." In the darkness of space, both sides prepared. The Valorans gathered their fleet, confident in their numbers, and humanity waited, patient and hungry, ready to remind the galaxy why it should never have knocked on their door. The Valoran fleet entered the Sol system like a wave of darkness rolling across the ocean. 20,000 ships moved in perfect formation. Their hulls blocked out the light of distant stars. Their weapons hummed with energy that could crack planets in half. Commander Dreth stood on the bridge of the eternal flame and watched the human homeworld grow larger on his screen. Earth, a small blue planet covered in water and clouds. It looked fragile. It looked like something he could crush with a single thought. "Report," he said. His tactical officer responded immediately. "Human defense fleet detected." 312 vessels, positioned in high orbit around Earth. Dreth felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. 300 ships against 20,000. It was not even a battle. It was an execution. Their ships are old, the officer continued. Most of them are at least 50 cycles behind our technology. Limited weapons. Weak shields. Vin stood beside Dreth, his old eyes fixed on the screen. He said nothing, but his body was stiff with worry. Begin the approach, Dreth ordered. Standard attack formation. We end this today. Valoran fleets surged forward. They passed Mars without stopping. They passed the asteroid belt without slowing. Every second brought them closer to Earth. Every second brought them closer to victory. And then the trap closed. It began in the asteroid belt. Rocks that had drifted silently for years suddenly split open. From inside them emerged ships. Human ships. Thousands of them. Their hulls were black and smooth, built to hide in the darkness of space. Their weapons were like nothing the Valorans had ever seen. Dreth watched in shock as his rear formations were torn apart. Ships exploded in flashes of white light. Communications filled with screaming and static. What is happening? He shouted. Before anyone could answer, more ships appeared. From the moons of Jupiter. From the rings of Saturn. From hollowed-out comets that had been drifting toward the sun. Humanity's hidden fleet emerged from every shadow, every hiding place. Every dark corner of the solar system, Captain Mina Cho sat in the command chair of the battleship Indomitable. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night studying Valoran tactics. Now, it was time to put that training to use. All weapons ready, her tactical officer reported. Mina smiled. Show them what we built. The Indomitable opened fire. Its main cannon released a beam of concentrated energy that cut through 3 Valoran ships in a single shot. The enemy vessels did not explode. They simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, the next moment they were atoms drifting in the void. All across the battlefield, human ships were doing the same. The technology they had reverse-engineered from the crashed Valoran scout ship had been improved, enhanced, weaponized, beyond anything the Dominion had ever imagined. Commander. Dreth watched his fleet being torn apart and felt something he had never felt before. Real fear. Not the small worry that comes before a battle. True fear, the kind that makes your hands shake and your thoughts scatter. How is this possible? He whispered. Vin was already working at a console, pulling up data from the human ships. His face went pale as he read the results. These weapons, he said, his voice trembling. They are based on our own technology. But they have been modified, improved. He looked at Dreth with wide eyes. They found our scout ship, the one we lost 40 years ago. They took it apart. They learned from it. And then they built something better. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Valorans had the numbers. The humans had the strategy. Every time Dreth tried to regroup his forces, the humans anticipated the move. Every time he found a weakness in their formation, it turned out to be a trap. Captain Mina guided the Indomitable through maneuvers that should have been impossible. The ship twisted and turned at speeds that would have killed Valoran pilots. But human bodies were different. They were built to survive forces that would break other species. Their hearts pumped harder. Their minds stayed clear. They did not just endure the stress of combat. They thrived on it. Enemy flagship detected, her tactical officer reported. The Eternal Flame. Commander Dreth is on board. Mina looked at the massive Valoran ship on her screen. It was the size of a small moon. Its weapons could devastate entire continents. It was the most powerful vessel the Dominion had ever built. Can we reach it? She asked. The path is heavily defended. We would take significant damage. Amina nodded slowly. She thought about her crew, her ship. The mission they had trained for, set course for the Eternal Flame, she ordered. All power to forward shields and weapons. The Indomitable charged forward. Valoran ships tried to block its path and were destroyed. Missiles and energy beams slammed into its shields, but the ship kept moving. Nothing could stop it. On the eternal flame, Dreth watched the human battleship approaching. It was on fire. Parts of its hull were melting away. And still, it came. "They are insane," he said. Vin shook his head. "No, they are human. This is what they do. They sacrifice themselves to hurt their enemies. They accept death if it means victory." The Indomitable reached the Eternal Flame's defensive perimeter and opened fire. Its dying weapons cut deep into the flagship's shields. Alarms screamed across Dreth's bridge, and then, at the last moment, Captain Mina ordered her crew to the escape pods. They launched into space as the Indomitable continued its charge alone, guided by computer. The battleship slammed into the Eternal Flame shield generator and exploded in a ball of light that could be seen from Earth. When the light faded, the Eternal Flame was crippled. Its shields were down. Its weapons were offline. The most powerful ship in the Valoran fleet was now just a floating piece of metal. Dreth stared at the destruction and finally understood. The humans had not just beaten his fleet. They had shown him something terrible. Something that changed everything he thought he knew about war. They were willing to die. Not because they had to. Because they chose to. Because victory mattered more than survival, he gave the order to retreat as the surviving Valoran ships fled the solar system. Human rescue teams recovered Captain Mina and her crew from their escape pods. They were battered and exhausted, but they were alive. And when they looked at the burning wreckage of the enemy fleet, they smiled. The first battle was over. Humanity had won. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion would return with more ships, more soldiers, more determination to crush the species that had dared to fight back, and humanity would be waiting, patient, hungry, ready to remind the galaxy that some prey bites back. Ambassador Unipark stood in a small room deep inside Earth's military headquarters. The walls were covered with screens showing feeds from across the galaxy, news reports from Valoran-controlled worlds, propaganda broadcasts from the Dominion, and most importantly, reactions from the 100 species that lived under Mothrel's rule. She was no longer an ambassador. Defense Minister Tay had given her a new job, a more dangerous one. Psychological operations, Tay had explained. The battle in space is important. But the battle for minds is what will win this war. Una had accepted without hesitation. She understood something that most people did not. Fear was a weapon. Hope was a weapon. The right words at the right time could do more damage than 1,000 battleships. Her team had spent 2 weeks preparing. They had studied every species under Valoran control. They had learned their languages, their histories, their deepest fears, and oldest dreams. And they had created a message that would shake the foundations of the Dominion. "Are we ready?" Una asked. Her communications officer, a young man named Jay, nodded. "We have access to every public broadcast frequency in Dominion space. Once you begin speaking, 100 worlds will hear you." Una took a deep breath. She thought about her newspaper, the old piece of paper she had carried across the galaxy. She had used it as a symbol of human arrogance. Now she would use it for something else. Begin transmission. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. In factories where enslaved workers built Valoran weapons. In mines where prisoners dug for precious metals. In homes where families huddled together and dreamed of freedom. "My name is Unipark," she said. "I speak for the people of Earth, and I have something to show you." The screens changed. They showed humanity's history. Not the sanitized version that governments like to share. The real version, the terrible version, wars that killed millions. Weapons that poisoned the air and water. Leaders who sent their own people to die for power and glory. Concentration camps. Genocides. Nuclear explosions. "This is what we have done to ourselves," Una continued. "This is the darkness that lives inside humanity. We do not hide it. We do not pretend it does not exist." The screens showed something else. Cities being rebuilt from rubble. Enemies shaking hands and signing treaties. children playing in parks that had once been battlefields. But this is also what we are. We destroy, and then we create. We fall, and then we rise. No matter how many times we hurt ourselves, we always find a way to heal. She paused. Her eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer across 100 worlds. The Valoran Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 9,000 years. They have never faced a species like us. They have never fought an enemy that refuses to surrender. And 3 days ago, they learned what that means. The screens showed the battle in the Sol system. Valoran ships exploding. Human vessels charging through walls of fire. The eternal flame being crippled by Captain Mina's sacrifice. They sent 20,000 ships to destroy us. We sent them running. Yuna leaned forward. I am not telling you this to make you afraid of us. I am telling you this to give you something the Dominion has tried to take away. Hope. The old paper was yellowed and worn, but the words were still visible. This is from Earth. 1945. The headline says, War ends. We had just finished the most destructive conflict in our history. We had used weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. And instead of continuing to fight, we chose peace. We chose to build instead of destroy. She set the newspaper down. You have been told that resistance is impossible. You have been told that the Dominion cannot be defeated. But we are proof that this is a lie. We are proof that even the smallest species can stand against the largest empire. Her voice grew stronger. The Dominion's power comes from your fear. They rule because you believe you cannot win. But what if you stopped believing that? What if every factory stopped producing weapons? What if every mine stopped sending resources? What if every world decided that freedom was worth fighting for? She smiled. You are not alone anymore. Earth stands with you, and we do not surrender. The transmission ended. Yuna slumped back in her chair, exhausted. She had no idea if her words would make any difference. She had no idea if anyone was even listening. But across the galaxy, something was already changing. On the mining world of Veth, workers stopped their machines and gathered in the darkness. They whispered to each other about the human broadcast, about the species that had beaten the Dominion, about the possibility of freedom. On the factory planet of Korra, supervisors found their production lines empty. The enslaved workers had simply walked away. They did not fight. They did not riot. They just refused to work. On a dozen worlds, then 100 small acts of defiance began to spread. Messages were passed in secret. Symbols were painted on walls. The word hope was spoken in languages that had not been allowed for centuries. Hi. Sovereign Mothrel received the reports in his throne room and felt cold rage building in his chest. The humans had not just beaten his fleet, they had planted seeds of rebellion across his empire. This cannot be allowed, he said. His advisors stood before him, their heads bowed. No one wanted to speak. No one wanted to suggest what they all knew was necessary. We must crush Earth completely, Mothrel continued. Not just defeat them, destroy them. Burn their world until nothing remains but ash. Make an example that the galaxy will never forget. He stood from his throne and walked to the window that overlooked his capital city. Millions of Valorans lived below him. Millions more served in his fleets. He had built an empire that stretched across the stars, and one small planet threatened to bring it all down. Send everything, he ordered. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. I want the humans wiped from existence. His military commanders exchanged nervous glances. Sending the entire fleet would leave other systems undefended. It would mean abandoning the edges of the empire to focus on a single target. But no one argued. No one dared. The humans think they have one, Mothrel said. They think their little victory means something. I will show them what it means to challenge the Dominion. He turned back to face his commanders. Prepare the fleet. We move on Earth in 10 days. On Earth the reports arrive within hours. Human spies had been watching the Dominion for years. They knew what Mothrel was planning before his own commanders did. Defense Minister Tay read the intelligence report and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. The entire Valoran fleet was coming, not 20,000 ships. All of them. Over 100,000 vessels carrying enough firepower to crack continents and boil oceans. He called an emergency meeting with Admiral Seok and Ambassador Yuna. "Can we win?" Tay asked. Seok was silent for a long moment. He had studied the numbers. He had run the simulations. He knew exactly what humanity was facing. "We can hurt them," he finally said. "We can make them pay for every inch of space. But if they bring everything they have, the math is simple. We will run out of ships before they do." Yuna looked at the map showing the approaching fleet. "So many enemies. So much death coming their way, and we need to change the math," she said. "We need to make sure they do not have everything when they arrive." She thought about her broadcast, about the uprisings beginning across the galaxy, about the 100 species that were starting to remember what freedom felt like. "The Dominion's empire is shaking," Yuna said. "If we can make it shake harder, Mothral will have to choose between destroying us and holding his empire together." Tay nodded slowly. "A war on two fronts. Make him fight his own subjects while fighting us." "It's not just that," Yuna said. "Make him realize that even if he destroys Earth, his empire is already dying. Make him understand that he is already lost." The three of them looked at each other. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. They knew that many of them would not survive. But they also knew something else. Something that Mothral would never understand. Humanity did not fight because they expected to win. They fought because giving up was not in their nature. They had survived ice ages and plagues and nuclear weapons. They had survived themselves. The Valoran Dominion was just another challenge. Another test? Another enemy that would learn the hard way what it meant to threaten Earth. The final battle was coming, and humanity would face it the only way they knew how. Together. The sky above Earth burned with light. 100,000 Valoran ships filled the darkness, their formations stretching from horizon to horizon. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. Enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. Enough soldiers to conquer every nation that had ever existed on Earth. High Sovereign Mothral watched from the bridge of his new flagship, the Unbreakable Will. He had learned from the last battle. This ship was twice as large as the Eternal Flame. Its shields could withstand nuclear weapons. Its weapons could cut moons in half. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Leave nothing standing." The Valoran fleet surged forward. Weapons fired. The battle for Earth had begun. Admiral Seok stood on the bridge of the Taigak, humanity's hidden flagship. The ship was the size of a small moon, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid over 30 years. It had been humanity's final secret, their last hope. And now it was time to use it. "All ships engage," Seok commanded. His voice was calm. His hands were steady. He had been a soldier his entire life. He had known this day would come. The human fleet met the Valoran advance. Ships clashed in explosions of light and fire. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams cut through armor and flesh. The scale of destruction was beyond anything either side had ever seen. Captain Mina Cho had recovered from her injuries and now commanded the Sunrise, a new battleship even more powerful than the Indomitable. She led her squadron into the thickest part of the fighting, targeting Valoran command ships with deadly precision. "Focus on their communications vessels," she ordered. "Break their coordination." Her ships obeyed. One by one, Valoran command vessels began to fall. Without them, entire sections of the enemy fleet lost their ability to work together. Ships that should have been supporting each other began to overlap and collide, but the numbers were still against humanity. For every Valoran ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. Human casualties mounted. Orbital stations were shattered. Pieces of debris began to fall through Earth's atmosphere, burning like falling stars. On the surface, billions of humans watched the sky and waited. They had built shelters. They had prepared for the worst. But nothing could prepare them for the feeling of watching their defenders die one by one. Mothral smiled as he watched the battle unfold. The humans were fighting hard. Harder than any species he had ever faced. but they were losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were being ground down. Target the population centers, he ordered. Begin orbital bombardment of the major cities. Show them that resistance is death. His weapons officers hesitated. High Sovereign, our intelligence suggests the humans have civilian shelters that extend deep underground. Orbital bombardment may not be effective. I do not care about effectiveness, Mothral said. I care about making them suffer. I care about showing the galaxy what happens to those who defy me. Fire. Beams of energy began to rain down on Earth. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were erased in seconds. The death toll climbed into the billions. On the Tygok, Admiral Sayok received the reports with a heavy heart. So many lives lost, so much destruction. He had known this was possible. He had prepared for it. But knowing and experiencing were different things. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, our fleet is down to 40% strength. We cannot sustain this level of combat much longer. Sayok looked at the map showing the battle. Red icons representing human ships were blinking out one by one. Blue icons representing Valoran ships still filled the screen like a swarm of angry insects. Time to use the final option, he said. He opened a channel to all surviving human ships. His voice reached every captain, every pilot, every soldier still fighting. This is Admiral Sayok. I know you are tired. I know you are afraid. But I need you to hold on a little longer. Help is coming. He closed the channel and turned to his communications officer. Send the signal. Tell them it is time. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds where Valoran occupation forces were stretched thin, coordinated uprisings began. The rebellions that Yuna's broadcast had sparked finally ignited into full flames. Slaves became soldiers. Workers became warriors. Species that had been conquered for millennia rose up together. Reports flooded into Mothrel's flagship. Riots on Veth, rebellion on Korra, entire systems declaring independence from the Dominion. His empire was burning behind him while he focused on Earth. Impossible, Mothrel whispered. This is not possible. Vin, who had survived the first battle, stood beside him. The old advisor's face was grim. I tried to warn you, Vin said. The humans did not just fight us. They taught the galaxy how to fight. They showed everyone that resistance was possible. Mothrel's hands shook with rage. I will destroy them all. Every species that dares to defy me. I will burn their worlds and salt their soil. Cannot, Vin replied quietly. Your fleet is here, and your empire is dying. Captain Mina saw an opening in the Valoran formation. The enemy flagship, the Unbreakable Will, was exposed. Its defensive screen had been pulled away to deal with other threats. For a brief moment, there was a clear path. All power to engines, she ordered. Set course for the enemy flagship. Her crew understood immediately. This was a one-way mission. There would be no escape pods this time. No last-minute rescue. Captain, her first officer, said, If we do this, we will not survive. Mina looked at her crew. Men and women who had trained with her, fought with her, trusted her with their lives. I know, she said. But if we succeed, Earth survives. Our families survive. Everything we have ever fought for survives. She took a deep breath. I am not ordering you to come with me. Anyone who wants to leave can take an escape pod now. No one will think less of you. No one moved. No one spoke. Every member of her crew remained at their station. Mina smiled. That is what I thought. The sunrise accelerated toward the Unbreakable Will. Valoran ships tried to intercept, but the battleship was too fast. It moved through the chaos of battle like a bullet, straight and unstoppable. Ambassador Yuna watched from Earth's surface. She stood in a broadcast center ready to send one final message. If Mina succeeded, she would have seconds to deliver humanity's final blow. The sunrise hit the Unbreakable Will at full speed. The impact was visible from Earth, a flash of light brighter than the sun. When it faded, both ships were gone. Mothrel was dead. The Valoran command structure was shattered. And across the galaxy, Species that had been watching the battle saw something they would never forget. Humans died to protect their home. Not because they had to, because they chose to. Because some things mattered more than survival. Una began her broadcast. "People of the galaxy," she said, "my name is Una Park. The High Sovereign of the Valoran Dominion is dead. His flagship is destroyed, and his empire is falling apart." She held up her newspaper. The old paper was faded now, but the words were still clear. This is from 1945. A time when my people had just survived the worst war in our history. The headline says, "War ends. We chose peace then. We can choose it now." She looked directly into the camera. "We have already survived the worst thing in this universe, ourselves. Your dominion was never a threat to us." It was a reminder that we must always be ready. Always be willing to protect what we love. She set the newspaper down. "The war is over. Not because we have defeated every enemy, but because you have shown that you will not be slaves anymore. Every uprising, every rebellion, every act of defiance has weakened the chains that held you." She smiled. "We do not want to rule you. We do not want to conquer your worlds. We only want what every species deserves: freedom, peace, the chance to decide your own future." She paused. "The choice is yours now. Keep fighting and free yourselves, or we will help you. Either way, the Dominion dies today." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, the remaining Valoran commanders saw the truth. Their leader was dead. Their empire was burning, and the species they had tried to destroy was offering them something they had never expected: mercy one by one. Valoran ships began to surrender. The battle for Earth slowed and then stopped. The largest military conflict in galactic history ended not with a final explosion, but with silence. 6 months later, representatives from every former Dominion world gathered on a space station orbiting Earth. They had come to sign a new treaty. A new beginning. Una represented humanity at the ceremony. She wore her gray diplomatic uniform and carried her newspaper, framed behind glass. A young alien delegate approached her after the signing. His species had been enslaved for 800 years. He had never known freedom until today. "I have to ask," he said. "When war was declared, when you stood alone in that chamber, were you not afraid?" Una thought about the question. She remembered standing before Mothral. She remembered the weight of 100 worlds watching her. She remembered the cold certainty that everything could go wrong. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Every day of this war, I have been afraid." The delegate looked confused. "Then how did you do it? How did you keep fighting?" Una held up her framed newspaper. She looked at the old paper, at the headline that had meant so much to her for so long. "Fear is human," she said, "but so is stubbornness. So is hope. So is the refusal to give up no matter how bad things get." She looked out the window at the stars, at the galaxy that had just been freed, at the future that was waiting to be built.